a lusting, okay, a strong desire. You have emulations, okay. Basically what that is rivalries. You have wrath, which is violent motion. Reveling is like partying. Of course, we know what murder is, drunkenness, etc. All right, all of those are different things that the flesh lusts after. All right, when you get into these two here, envying, which again, when we typically envy somebody, we envy them for what it is that they have, okay? and we want it. So that's part of, you know, being materialistic. And then you also have strife. You look this term up, it means mercenary interest. If you're not familiar with a mercenary is basically somebody who's for hire. So in other words, you're talking about a person who will do anything for money. Matter of fact, there's a passage. And people get this, they say that money is the root of all evil. No, that's not what the scripture says. The lust for money is the root of all evil. The lust for money is the root of all evil. And that's where this term strife comes from. Okay? Again, mercenary interest. And then you have our intellectualism side. Of course, we know what idolatry is. Basically, you're talking about false worship. Now, one of the things, too, before I get into, you know, just going through this list, when it comes to intellectualism, right, because we talked about that, intellectualism is also broken down into three subcategories. All right, you have religion, which it would include the idolatry, okay, and the witchcraft. Now, the difference between the idolatry and the witchcraft is actually when you're getting into what they call pharmakeia. Now you're talking about putting little, you know, herbs together. Think about the idea of a witch doctor, okay, and what the witch doctor does. Now, not only does the witch doctor put together herbs for the healing, but think about some of the other drugs that we have now. Think about something like an LSD. Think about something like any mind-altering drug. Where it comes from? It comes from something that the earth naturally produces. But back during those days, they would make elixirs from these different herbs so that they could have some experiences. And I'm not going to get too far into that, but you get the idea. But that's the witchcraft aspect of it. Okay, still tied into the intellectualism part. Again, under intellectualism, the three subcategories or subtopics, you have religion, you have philosophy, and you have science. Okay, those fall under intellectualism. They can be broken down even further, but you get the point. So you have variance. Now with variance is, you know, bargaining. You know, think about bargain. Think about what you do when you go to a store, and maybe like a flea market or something like that. Not necessarily a store like Walmart or Target, because the prices are fixed there. But if you go to some place like a flea market, you can potentially bargain with somebody, maybe negotiate, and they can bring the price down. Well, think about it in that context. Variance. Bargaining. But think about it in the context of, I'm going to bargain with you as it pertains to this way of life. People may hear that and say, well, how could a person do that? People have done that. Okay, when it comes to, well, you know what? If you look at it from this perspective, or if you take it from that perspective, and then what somebody may eventually start to do is change or alter the way the word is supposed to be kept. And there are many examples that can be given about that. Okay, but again, we want to stay on this point. You have seditions. Okay. Now, sedition is basically what you're talking about. You're talking about the word itself is divisive, but now this is where you get the what it says here, the contentious minority. So the perfect example of that, you had Pharisees or Perushim, okay, which were the separated ones supposedly, right? Then you had the Sadducees, who were the Zadokim. They were supposed to be from the priestly line. And then you had another group. The Bible doesn't mention their name, but historically we learned that there was also what was called the Essenes. And Yochanan HaMetzabel, or John the Baptist, was supposedly a part of that group. Because when you think about his life and how he had an aesthetic lifestyle. Like, as a matter of fact, the Messiah himself said that John came neither eating nor drinking. Because when you look at the Essenes lifestyle, they didn't eat like everybody else ate. They had a limited diet. Okay? So, but my point in mentioning that, they created little, groups within the larger group of Israel. All right? So they were seditions. Then you have heresies. Heresies is interesting enough. It simply shows that somebody has a different opinion. And when you get into a lot of the churches today, everybody has an opinion. When it comes to the word, everybody has an opinion. It's heretical. Okay? That's what it is. And of course you have hatred, and what that means simply is what it shows. You have people who are simply in opposition of what it is that's being taught. Okay? So all of these different listings here are the works of the flesh, and they can all be categorized under either being hedonistic, materialistic, or intellectual. All right? Now, going back to our passages, let's go down to Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15. And listen to what he says here. And this is after everything's said and done, and he's going through dealing with each individual, and now he starts to dispense the judgment. But listen to what he says to the serpent. He said, I will put hostility. Now, let me say this. The first part of that, which I didn't list it on here in verse 14, he basically said with the serpent, he was going to cause the serpent to crawl on his belly and eat dust all the days of his life. So that changes the whole idea of what a serpent would be. Now, when we see a serpent today, we see it as, a snake, rather. We see it, slithering on the ground. What we learn from that judgment is that the serpent, if it wasn't slithering on the ground already, the potentiality is that it walked upright just like humanity did. But as a part of the curse for what it did in being a willful participant in the deception of humanity, now had to slither on his belly. Okay, that's one aspect. But when you get to verse 15, he's moving beyond now the serpent. He says, I will put enmity or hostility between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He will bruise your head, and you will bruise his heel. Now, this is our introduction to the idea that the serpent would have a seed. And I'm not talking about the serpent that slithers on the ground right now. I'm talking about that old serpent called the devil and Satan. The opponent. Remember? Because the serpent is an animal. It's one of the beasts of the field. But it just so happened that the opponent chose to use the serpent to do what he did to Hawa, or to Eve. Okay, so keep these things in mind. All right? Now, we get introduced once again to the idea of the seed of the serpent. That's very important, because once Adam and Hawa fell, guess what happened? Look at the dialogue that took place, right? And we took a look at this as well, so you may remember this. There's a passage in the New Testament, okay, where Brother Paul, he's talking to, I believe it may have been the Corinthians or it may have been the Romans. My apology for not knowing exactly which letter this was in, but you may get the reference. He said, you may have thousands of teachers in the Messiah, right? But you only have one Father. He says, because I have begotten you by the word. What he meant by that was this. Excuse me. He meant, I am the one who introduced you to the Most High. I'm the one who introduced you to the Messiah. And what he's saying by that, what his point is, when he says, I have begotten you by the word, he said, I've become a father to you. Because when you look at the comparison of the word to being a seed in one of the parables that the Messiah gave, when he said the seed is the word, right? So we understand that when we're speaking the word, we're actually planting seeds. So if we are introducing somebody to the Most High, we have just planted a seed. So in essence, what Brother Paul is saying, I have begotten you by the word. Okay? Now, we don't want to get into, well, this is the Most High doing. We understand that, but the Creator still has to use us as willing vessels. Okay? Now, taking that concept, now I wanted to just interject that as an example so you understand the next point that I'm about to make. When it came to the serpent and he had that dialogue with Eve, did Elohim really say, you won't surely die? He planted seeds. And you know what happened when he planted those seeds? Those seeds took root. You know how we know that? Because their thought process changed. And what they ended up doing was doing what the Most High commanded them not to do. So they had been begotten by the word of the serpent. That's what happened. So whose children are they now? And this, we got to have that mindset. Because what we're talking about here, it's the introduction, but introduction to the adoption. We're talking about the adoption. Why is it necessary for an adoption to take place? So let's look at a few passages now, okay? Some people may be questioning. That's fine, it's good. Ask questions. And as has been stated numerous times, don't take my word for it. When you have questions, here's what you do. And I hope people really do this too. I'm not saying this to try to sound smooth or slick or anything like this. This is actual advice that you should take heed to and follow through with if you want to know the truth. You ask the Creator. You pray. You ask the Creator with humility and with sincerity to lead and guide you to His truth. Now, I have no truth. I'm nothing but a man. I'm the dust of the earth. I have no truth. I can only speak what Abba gives me the will to speak. That's it. Okay? So let's go through some scriptures now. Let's substantiate what I'm talking about. In Yochanan, or John chapter 8, 42 to 44. Listen to what the Messiah said. And here's what I want y'all to keep in mind, because this is going to come back up. He's talking to Israel right now. He's talking to Israel. Listen to what he said. Yahushua said unto them, if Elohim were your father. Listen to what he's saying. It's very important that we get this, because we're going to touch on some things a little later on, not today, but in the course of this particular topic, the adoption, that's going to show some other stuff. Okay? But even when it comes to Israel, Yahushua said unto them, if Elohim were your father, if Elohim were your father, you would love me. For I proceeded forth and came from Elohim. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not understand my speech? Even because you cannot hear my word. Listen to what he's saying now. He said, you are of your father, the devil. You hear that? You have Israelites who are still connected to the opponent. And the lust of your father you will do. Look at the works of the flesh. The lust of your father you will do. Yahweh created man upright. But man has sought out clever plans. See? Man sought this out. He was a murderer from the beginning and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. You hear that? He talking to Israel, though. We don't want to lose sight of that. Let's move on. Listen to what he says. Let's go to Matthew chapter 13. He gave a parable, right? In verse 24, it says, another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. Now what's interesting about this, and one of the Murray of Bet Yahweh, he taught this years ago, and he did some research into the wheat and the tares, and what he was teaching, what he brought forth is that the tares look similar to the wheat. So it's a little difficult to make that distinction unless you really know. You know, for somebody like me who's not really that familiar with it, I may not be able to make the difference. But somebody who's familiar with growing wheat can probably tell from even from the minute differences, oh, that's a tare and that's wheat. But I thought it was interesting when he brought it out that they look similar. Okay, the wheat and the tares. And you can, and as far as people, you know, who have lawns and that do lawn care, you can look at a tare simply being something like a weed. All right. Now let's drop down to the interpretation of this in verse 36, still Matthew chapter 13. Then Yahushua sent the multitude away and went into the house, and his disciples came to him, saying, Declare unto us the parable of the tares of the field. He answered and said to them, He that sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, the good seed are the children of the kingdom. When it says the children of the kingdom, here's what we want to do. I'm going to put my little... Okay. You got two sides. You on the side of the serpent or on the side of Elohim. Okay? One or two. When it says the good seed are the children of the kingdom, you're talking about the seed of Elohim. Okay? The seed of Elohim are called Israel. Okay? Keep that in mind. Once again, Matthew 13:38. The field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom. But the tares are the children of the wicked one. Who's the wicked one? The opponent. And he has children. The same thing he was telling, you are of your father, the devil. See, but what we have to understand, humanity as a result of the fall starts out on this side. The only way to get to this side is because now you have to now adhere to this word, whatever that word may be. Okay? And I'm not saying whatever that word may be in the context, like, well, there are many different ways to the Creator. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it in the context of the time frame. Because the Torah existed even before Moshe came on the scene. Because you got some people like to say that Moshe got this from Egypt. But willing, we're going to take a further look into that too. So many different things that people are misconstruing and confusing about Holy Scripture. Holy Scripture has not plagiarized from anything. People may take issue and argue that point, but they are sadly mistaken. Sadly mistaken. That's not how things happen. But the opponent sure would have you thinking that way. See, that's getting into intellectualism and, you know, the various additions, heresies, hatred, etc. See, all of that. But anyway, we got two groups of people in the world. Okay? Let's go to Bereshit once again, chapter 25, verse 23. Now, this is about Rebecca or Rivka, and it's about her being pregnant with the twins. Listen to what it says. She was having some issues, so she went to consult the Most High. In verse 23, Yahweh said to her, 2 nations are in your womb. 2 peoples will be separated from your body. The one people will be stronger than the other people. The elder will serve the younger. So what I want to do is this. And what I don't want y'all to do is get so caught up on these names that I'm about to put up under here, because we're going to see some things in the course. Now, she was about to have 2 sons. One of those sons was Esau. The other son was Jacob. Okay? All right. Now, in this example, from this passage, okay, I'm going to keep that in mind. Esau represents the seed of the serpent. Jacob represents the seed of Elohim. Now, something about both of these particular individuals is that their names will be changed. Esau's name would become Edom. And of course, Jacob's name would become Israel. Now, one of the things about this term Edom, which we discussed, the term Edom is simply a callback to this name. Adam. Because they both related to the exact same root, Dalet Mem, Dalet Mem. And if you look at the root for Adam, you look at the root for Edom, they both go back to the same term, which means to be reddish or ruddy. Okay? And that's based on the word Dalet Mem, which is the word for blood. Okay? The main difference in regard to the spelling, Adam is spelled Aleph Dalet Mem, and Edom is spelled Aleph Dalet Wav Mem. Okay? I believe Aleph Dalet Wav. I have to look that up. But my point is, when you look at Edom, don't get so focused on Edomites. Because when it comes to all the other nations, I could put Egypt under here, I could put Babylon under here, I could put Greece under here, I could put Rome under here. All of them. See? And what it represents, they represent fallen man. That was Adam. Okay? Keep that in mind. Now let's go to Romans chapter 8. We're going to finish out in Romans. Start in verse 1. There is therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Messiah Yahushua, who don't walk according to the flesh, meaning that you're walking according to the works of the flesh, according to fallen man, which is symbolized by Adam and represented also in the term Adam. All right? But according to the Spirit. In other words, the children of the kingdom, the seed of Elohim, Israel. And we're going to see that. We're going to see that. And as we get to it, it'll be explained further. Israel was chosen for a reason. Okay? They are the chosen people. They are the people of the book. They are. For a reason. But what we have to learn to do is to now differentiate. Because some people are of the belief that all physical Israel, and we're going to see passages that clearly show all physical Israel is not the case. And we have, as an example, we talked about this when we were going through who is Israel. We see examples in Holy Scripture that not all Israel are going to be saved. How can we prove that? Look at the wilderness. If you look at the practical lessons that's learned there. Look at the history of Israel throughout. The practical lessons that are learned there. Okay? But anyway. Verse 2. For the law of the Spirit of life in Messiah Yahushua made me free from the law of sin and death. When it talks about the law of sin and death, it's talking about a principle. When you think about a principle, right? Think about what they say as far as like the law of gravity, or the law of physics, the law of motion, etc. Okay? So there's a principle that exists, and it's called sin and death. Like we've looked at, how sin was given the capacity to crouch at the door. How sin was given the capacity as the Spirit working in the children of disobedience. Okay. Verse 3. For what the Torah couldn't do. Now, this is where we got to understand the parts that the Creator was looking at in regard to us as being human beings. He has deduced, he's observed humanity, he done seen what we like, and you know what? They are only evil continually. So Brother Shaul, he echoed the exact same sentiment. The carnal mind, talking about our human nature, is enmity. In other words, opposed to, opposition. That's right there. Our carnal nature is opposed to the Torah. And this coming from this context. So it said, for what the Torah couldn't do, in that it was weak through the flesh. Why was it weak through the flesh? Because we do not want to do what Abba wants us to do. That's why. Elohim did, sending his own son in the likeness of sinful flesh and for sin. Let me go back and read that from the beginning so you get the full thought. For what the Torah couldn't do, in that it was weak through the flesh, Elohim did. Okay? Sending his own son in the likeness of sinful flesh and for sin, he condemned sin in the flesh. Some people question that. I've heard somebody say, well, there is no need for a man to come down to die for the sins of humanity. Well, there's some things that we have to come to understand. And Abba willing, once again, Abba willing, we're going to talk about that in another topic. Okay? Because it just, sometimes we have to take a look at Holy Scripture and see what it is that Abba's been teaching the whole time. Matter of fact, we already started. We already started, and prayerfully, if Abba leads us that way, we'll be revisiting it. All right? And what I mean when I say we already started, because we were looking at the sacrificial system and some of the different nuances that we discussed talking about the sacrificial system. But anyway, let's get back to this. Once again, Romans 8:3. For what the Torah couldn't do, in that it was weak through the flesh, Elohim did, sending his own son in the likeness of sinful